For years, Detective Sarah Pritchard had been haunted by a single case. It had been one of the most disturbing investigations of her career, the disappearance of a young woman named Evelyn Harding. Evelyn's body had never been found, and no matter how deep they dug, no matter how many interviews they conducted, the case went cold. But the haunting had started long after the case had been closed. It began in the form of flashes, moments of memory that Sarah could never quite grasp. A face, pale and twisted in terror, pressing against a window, a scent of something rotting, and worst of all, the image of Evelyn Harding's body, her lifeless, cold form lying in the back of a van, covered by a tarp. But that body had never been found. It was a phantom of Sarah's mind, taunting her in the dead of night. The visions became more frequent, more vivid. Sometimes in the darkness of her bedroom, Sarah would wake up gasping, her hands trembling as she searched the room for something, anything that could explain the overwhelming sense of dread. The dreams had no clear structure, no resolution. They were chaotic, like shards of broken memories trying to piece themselves together. Her mind spun in circles, replaying her every move during the investigation. She'd been thorough, professional, but had she missed something? What if Evelyn had been right there, under her nose, and she never saw it? The guilt gnawed at her insides, the whispers of her own failure growing louder. The most disturbing part of all this was the nagging certainty that Evelyn was still out there, somewhere, alive. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that someone was following her. Shadows at the edges of her vision, figures flickering just out of sight. It was as if Evelyn had returned to torment her, to demand justice. But justice had been denied. Compelled by the visions, Sarah returned to the case files. She combed through the photographs, the notes, the interviews. She retraced every step, hoping to find something she had missed. But there was nothing new. The last place Evelyn had been seen was at a local diner, late at night, with no one able to corroborate what happened after that. Her hands shook as she flicked through the photographs again. She looked at Evelyn's picture, the missing girl's soft, innocent face. And then Sarah saw it, a detail she had overlooked before. In the background of one of the photos, behind a crowd of people at the diner, was a face she didn't recognize. A man, his features hidden in the shadows, his eyes fixed on Evelyn. He seemed familiar. It was an unsettling thought, but one that nagged at her, like an itch she couldn't scratch. The face appeared in her dreams too. Every night, that same man would emerge from the darkness, standing just beyond her reach, his expression a twisted mask of malice. And with him, that same horrible, decaying body. Evelyn's body, unmoving, lifeless. It was a message. Sarah was certain of it. But what did it mean? Unable to resist the pull any longer, Sarah decided to confront this unknown man. She dug into the photograph, tracing the image back to its source. It led her to a small, dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. It was a place she had passed many times but had never thought to investigate. The house stood in isolation, hidden by overgrown weeds and trees. The windows were boarded up, and a deep sense of foreboding hung in the air as Sarah approached. She stepped through the rusty gate and walked slowly toward the front door. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of something unspoken pressing down on her. When she reached for the door handle, the door creaked open as if inviting her inside. The interior was cold and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew and decay. There was no light, only the eerie silence that enveloped the house. Sarah's footsteps echoed through the empty halls as she moved deeper into the darkness, drawn by an invisible force. Then, she found it, a hidden room, tucked away behind a false wall in the basement. The door creaked open to reveal a space unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. The walls were lined with old rusted chains and tattered cloth, the floor covered in stains, blood, old and dried. But it wasn't the blood that made her stomach churn. It was the person chained to the wall. The figure, barely alive, emaciated and hollow-eyed, was gasping for breath. It was Evelyn. But Evelyn was no longer the innocent girl she had once been. Her eyes were wide with terror, but there was something else, something malevolent, lurking behind them. Her skin was stretched tight over her bones, her lips cracked and split, but she wasn't dead. Not yet. Before Sarah could react, the man from the photograph appeared, stepping out from the shadows. His face was no longer hidden, and Sarah's heart froze as she recognized him. It was her. The same eyes, the same face, but distorted, twisted, as if pulled from the deepest recesses of her own subconscious. The man, if he could even be called that, was a reflection of herself, a darker, more horrific version. The realization hit Sarah like a thunderclap. She had done this. She had brought Evelyn here, along with countless others before her. The bodies she had never found, the ones that had disappeared without a trace, were never really gone. She had been the one to take them. She had kept them. She had tortured them, fed them to the demon that lurked in the shadows of her mind, the creature that had made her a deal, a pact in exchange for power, for the ability to solve every case, to become something more than human. The memories rushed back in an overwhelming flood. She saw herself, a younger version of herself, standing over a body, a knife in hand, carving into flesh. She saw the faces of the people she had killed. Strangers, yes, but also the faces of those she had once known. Friends, family, all sacrifices to feed the demon that demanded souls in exchange for the power to control life and death. The room spun as the horrifying truth settled into her bones. Evelyn was just the latest in a long line of victims, their bodies left to rot in this forgotten place. And she had been complicit in it all. Evelyn's eyes locked onto hers, pleading, but Sarah felt no empathy. She felt nothing, only an insatiable hunger to feed the demon that had possessed her for so long. As Sarah stood there, her hands trembling with the weight of her own monstrous deeds, the demon's presence filled the room. It was an invisible force, suffocating and cold, and it whispered in her mind, reminding her of the price she had paid for the power she craved. The deal was never ending, and now there would be no escape. The walls of the room seemed to close in on her, the floor beneath her feet giving way to an abyss. Evelyn's body, her once fragile form, contorted in agony as the demon's influence spread, consuming her. And Sarah was no longer Sarah. She was the keeper of souls, the one who tortured, the one who fed, the one who was bound to the darkness forever. In the depths of that forgotten room, the body of Evelyn Harding and so many others would never be found. Their screams would be lost to the void, and Sarah would never be free.